toxic masculinity.
Biden and Pelosi prohibited from taking
Communion.
communion. What is it?
What is communion? Communion is when the Catholics do mass and then they have like the wafer and the wine. So yeah, let me reiterate that headline for you. Biden and Pelosi prohibited from taking communion. I think that's fantastic. I think that's fantastic because they're pro-choice and the church is not pro-choice. The church is pro-life, and so it only makes sense. It only makes sense. I'm not Catholic. I'm Protestant, but I appreciate what the Catholics are doing here. Oh no, what have we got? We've got a bit of a technical disaster. And Valeria's walked away. All right, there we go. There's the story, and what do you what? Hey, no! What are you doing? Oh, you're changing that. Okay. What do you mean? Why? Why what? All right, so we'll wait for Valeria to come back. There she is. All right, and now let's go ahead and have a look at this story. So I was really focused on the other story today. We're only doing 2 stories, and one of them was a really big story. Just murder him. Just murder him. So I actually am looking forward to hearing this story as well. Reading it. Valeria is aiming her little stuffed animal at Aston. Okay, let's go ahead and listen to what this archbishop has to say.
If Biden or Pelosi showed up at a mass that you were saying and came to your communion line, would you be comfortable giving them Holy Communion?
That's a good and very pertinent question. I also speak in my document about the need for conversations to take place between pastors, the bishop or the parish pastor, and the individual, so they understand the error of their ways. They understand what the teaching of the church is. So that avoids such a situation. I have had such conversations with Speaker Pelosi. She knows that I stand by church teaching, and I know she is respectful enough not to do anything so provocative. So I'm confident that would not happen. In the case of President Biden or any other prominent Catholic, I think what I would do is, if I knew that they were coming into the area here and plan to attend Mass, I would try to have those conversations as well ahead of time.
All right, so this guy is basically like, they don't get mad. They don't get communion. They don't get communion, which I think is fantastic. The Catholic Archbishop of San Francisco says in a new interview that President Biden and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi cannot receive communion due to their political support for abortion. Archbishop Salvatore Cordileone told the Daily Caller that his private discussion that he has privately discussed the issue with Pelosi and that she knows better than to do something so provocative as taking communion. I think that's great. If Biden were to visit his archdiocese, he said that he would privately inform the president that he could not be receiving sacramental wine and bread, which Catholics believe becomes the literal body and blood and body of Christ. Cordileone said that it's important for church officials to have conversations so individuals understand the error of their ways. They understand. And okay, let me just say this, because all right, we heard what he had to say. We saw the interview, and here's my issue with Biden and Pelosi and all of these politicians, especially the Democrats specifically. They get away with murder, sometimes literally, right? They get away with all kinds of criminal activity, all kinds of nefarious behavior. I mean, obviously, Hunter Biden has got away with a ton of stuff. They're just not investigated. They're just not prosecuted. Nancy Pelosi's father used to take bribes. He was the mayor of Baltimore for many, many years. Very famous. What was his name? Starts with an A. Can't remember. Because obviously Pelosi is her married name. I forget what her father's name was. Very famous mayor of Baltimore. Anyway, he used to take bribes, right? And one of the men that used to bribe him was caught and tried and convicted of bribing the mayor. But the mayor was never tried, never convicted, never investigated, nothing. They didn't even touch him. They were just like, oh, he's the mayor, just leave him alone. He was just this corrupt mayor that could just get away with anything. And then Pelosi learned that from him, obviously. Now, Pelosi's never been investigated for anything, even though I've done a whole video on all the sinister stuff that she's done. But then her son started a company. The whole company was brought down by the FBI for fraud. Pretty much every single person in the company was arrested, tried, and convicted or plea bargained out of this situation because they're all criminals, you know. Guess who was never investigated? Guess who was never arrested? Guess who was never tried? Nancy Pelosi's son. The only person in that whole group of people that were working at that company that was not... You look very tired. Are you all right?
Just the son, like,
Okay.
you know.
Okay, all right. Yeah, he was the only one that got away with it scot-free. Hunter Biden, same thing. One of his good friends, he was in a business venture with a good friend of his, turned out to be, and they were working with a guy that had started a Ponzi scheme. His buddy is now in prison, I believe. Hunter Biden, never investigated, never arrested, nothing. And we know he's done he's committed a number of crimes that we have, you know, open and shut case evidence for, right? Open and shut case evidence. And he's never been arrested, never been even looked at, as far as I'm aware, by investigators. And so there is a completely different standard of justice for Democrat politicians and their families and the rest of America. And certainly, this does not apply to Republicans, or at least not so much. I'm sure occasionally you'll find a Republican who's gotten away with some stuff because they're a politician or something like that. But like, look at Matt Gaetz. Matt Gaetz is being attacked, and you know, you remember that case? That was like a couple weeks ago, and it seemed to have just disappeared. But there was this big rumor that, oh my gosh, Matt Gaetz is going to go to prison because he's a human trafficker. He's a sex trafficker. Matt Gaetz, because he drove with some girl across state lines. Matt Gaetz is like, okay, never happened. I never dated anybody that was underage. You guys are crazy. You know, this will come of nothing. You know, nothing's going to come of this. But the Democrats are just like, this is fact. This totally happened because some people sent us some anonymous rumors. And, you know, the suspicion on the conservative side was that this was just a smear campaign, right? That there was no evidence for this at all, that there were no anonymous sources, that this was just being made up by either politicians to smear Matt Gaetz or by reporters to smear Matt Gaetz, and there was nothing there. So, and like, look what happened to Trump. So justice seems to work, I wouldn't even say in two different ways. I would say it works in three different ways in America. You've got three systems of justice. You've got a system of justice for Democrats, which is they can get away with anything. You've got a system of justice for ordinary Americans, which is that, you know, the law applies to us, full stop. If we're caught committing a crime, we will be punished for committing that crime. And then there's a system of justice for the enemies of Democrats. If you're an enemy of Democrats, if you protested on January 6th, if you are Rudy Giuliani or Trump or Matt Gaetz or anybody that stands up to the Democrats, they will hunt you down and they will try to arrest you, try you, and convict you of crimes that you did not commit, right? So you will be falsely accused of crimes on the one hand, or you will simply be, you know, if you're, you know, there's three systems of government. All right, I just laid it out. I think I just laid it out pretty clearly. Anyway, point is, we no longer live in a just system where justice is blind. We live in this bizarre autocracy. Autocracy, is that right? Oligarchy? You okay? We live in an authoritarian regime. We live in 1984. We do not live in the free country that we used to, and we have to fight to get it back. Okay. So anyway, I guess the reason that I bring this up is because I'm just thankful that at least there's one person who's willing to stand up to Pelosi, who's willing to stand up to Biden and say, no, you're not going to get away with your crap. There's not going to be two standards of justice. There's going to be one standard of justice. If a regular Catholic can't take communion, you know, because they are pro-choice, neither can you. Just being a politician isn't going to change things for you. Just because you have some power and you're an elected official, you know, you're some kind of corrupt, powerful person, that does not mean that you get to take communion, right? This is the kind of guy who would have gone up to Al Capone and said, no, you can't take communion because you committed the sin of murdering people. So I like this guy. All right. Shall we? Do you have anything to say about this? Okay. Let's move on to the next story. Darling,
Do we just have two stories today?
we just have 2 stories today.
Okay. What's the name?
I'm not looking at it. Hold on. Rand Paul blasts Dr. Fauci for funding Wuhan lab.
Thank you, darling.
No, I want you to do it.
Rand Paul blasts Dr. Fauci for funding Wuhan lab.
Well, that was said with such emotion and grace. I gotta teach Valeria how to aggressively. Let's do let's have the lesson right now. Rand Paul blasts Dr. Fauci for funding Wuhan lab.
Not gonna say that.
Not gonna do it. Okay, all right, fine. Okay, fine. All right, let's have a look at this. So, this was on Tucker Carlson last night, and if you haven't seen the Tucker Carlson thing, I highly recommend it. It was thorough. It was brilliant. It was brilliant.
Toxic Masculinity. Weekdays, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific.